G'day guys, and welcome back for another episode of Adventure Ready here at Adelaide RV. And today we're going to be running through tips and tricks for first-time caravanners when they go out and use their van inside of caravan parks. The team at Discovery Parks Barossa Valley have been kind enough to let us use their park for the night, so I thought we would come on out, go through the entire setup and run you through some of my tips and tricks when it comes to first-time caravanners hitting the open roads and going into caravan parks. Alrighty, so one of the things that I always like to do whenever we're traveling, and especially when we did our 5-week trip up to Noosa, is every time we had a caravan park booking, always making sure that we give the office a call, either I guess a day before or the day of. Always give them a couple of hours. You just want to make sure, especially if you're doing online bookings, that it's actually gone through. There are so many vans on the road now, and the last thing you want to do is get into your destination or get into the town where there may be 2 or 3 caravan parks and to find that there's been an error with the booking, or there's been a double booking or something like that. So just as good practice, I always prefer to pick up the telephone either the day before you're meant to get there, or the morning of, and just make sure that the booking is in the system. They are expecting you. The last thing you want to do is get there last minute, especially if you've been traveling all day with a family, just to find out that the site's been double booked or something's happened. You know, obviously the online booking platforms now are fantastic, but I'm a bit old-fashioned when it comes to picking up the telephone and speaking to an actual human being on the other side of the desk and just making sure they have your booking. So first and foremost, before you get there, always just do a little courtesy call back to whatever park it is that you're in. And I guess on that, it is important that you do kind of plan in advance. I've mentioned this on film a couple of times before, but when Cassie, myself and Stella were traveling, we were going to destinations that had 4 or 5 big caravan parks, you know, inside of the one town, and we thought we would be fine, especially on that east coast. But multiple times it's 4:30, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and we are hustling, trying to get someone to take us. Twice we had to free camp because we just could not get a site at all. So, you know, if you're trying to be, you know, go with the wind and kind of be a little bit more free flowing, you know, obviously just try and have, you know, a few spots booked in, or make sure that there is availability, because I just assume that I'll be able to get a spot, and there's nothing more stressful than, you know, the kids are in the back, Stella's upset because she's due for a feed, we're on a highway, Cass is on the phone, caravan parks are shut, and you can't actually get onto anybody, and the online booking system won't let you book another site. It does become rather stressful, and just something you don't want to deal with. So always try and book in advance to make sure that your trip is as seamless as possible. Alrighty, here we are. We are out the front of the Discovery Parks Barossa Valley. It is a beautiful day. The weather has absolutely turned on for us. So I guess, you know, one of the first things when you do get to the park is just make sure that you park off to one side. So all of your caravan parks will have a designated parking bay off to one side. The last thing you want to do is go all the way up to the boom gate, because you're going to obviously affect other people that are trying to get in and out of the park. You know, people that are actually already in a setup, that have gone out for lunch or for dinner and are trying to come back in. So obviously sometimes the check-in process can take a little bit, especially if there's a couple of people in front of you. So just out of courtesy, just make sure you park off to either the left or right hand side of the boom gate, depending on the park. It'll have a stop sign like this, or something to indicate that this is where you need to park whenever it's time to check in. So we'll head inside now. We'll let the team at Discovery Parks know that we're here. We'll go through the check-in process. They'll give us a little code to the boom gate, and then we'll be able to head on into our site. Alrighty guys, so we're coming up to the boom gate. Now just remember that your van is wider than your vehicle. So again, you've got quite a bit going on here with the pin code, obviously the machinery for the boom gate. The last thing you want to do is get too close with your car and then forget that the van sits out, you know, that little bit wider than the vehicle again, and then wipe this out on your way through. So I know it may seem funny, but it has been done before. So yeah, just make sure that you're well aware. You've got your big mirrors out to the side. You're well aware of where the side of your van is before you come through here. And if you need to jump out and put the pin code in, that's fine. Just jump out and do that. You would rather do that than get too close and cause damage to the van as you come through. All right, let's go up and we'll put this pin code in. Alrighty, so we're in the park. We're up here next to the water park, which is what our little map says. So again, be courteous. I'm off to one side. I'm just going to walk. I'm going to check the site out, have a look at where the power is, have a look at where the water is, have a look at where the sewer is, and that'll give me an indication on exactly where I'm going to park. And I also want to be keeping an eye on where I can swing out to be able to reverse in. And this is what gets a lot of people. I'm going to give you a few little tips and tricks on reversing as we go in. Don't be scared. It's a very easy process. Just make sure you're well aware of your area and your surroundings. So let's walk over now and we'll check the site out. All right, so we can see here, we're actually very fortunate. We're backed onto the back of the toilet block. So you can actually, I can go right out and swing out nice and wide in towards the toilet block. There's a heap of room. Sometimes there'll be caravans just on the other side of you and it's a little bit tighter to get around. But I've got lots of room here to reverse in. So just be looking up here. Obviously, we've got a big gum tree here alongside of us, so I just want to be making sure there's no low-hanging branches, there's nothing there that could potentially pierce or hit the side of the van. We want to be, again, your van's going to be, call it 3 meters high, so you want to make sure that you've got plenty of room when you're going in as well. But it looks as if, obviously, the branches of this gum tree are quite high, so we've got plenty of room here. It's a relatively flat site, so we shouldn't need any chocks or anything like that. They put some matting down, which is quite nice. Our power and water is off on our door side, meaning we'll just have to run the cables and the hose around the backside. But again, I'll always try and have it sitting in between two sites just to obviously maximise space. But all looks pretty good. There's nothing here on the ground. Again, we've got an easy check in there, easy swing through. So yeah, let's get it in. Alrighty, so as you can see, we've got a heap of room here. We've been very, very fortunate in the site that they've put us on. So I've come out nice and wide to obviously give myself the best opportunity to be able to get it in first go and be able to reverse that through. One of the best tips I was ever given when it comes to reversing is, again, it is what the van will do, or the trailer, if you're backing a trailer, it'll do the opposite to what you do on a steering wheel, okay? So if you want the back of the van to go to the left, you've got to turn to the right, so on and so forth. But one of the best tips that I was ever given is actually put your hand on the bottom of the steering wheel. Okay, so if you put the bottom of the steering wheel, if you want the van to go that way, you go that way. If you want the van to go that way, you go that way. Okay, so bottom of the steering wheel and put your arm or your hand towards what direction you want the van to go. All right, so in this case, I want the back of the van to be going to the left-hand side. So again, hand on the bottom of the steering wheel, I'm pulling it around to the left. And as you'll see, that van will just come around there nicely. Always good to have a spotter as well. So if you do have your wife or someone there, as you can see, I've kind of overshot that a little bit, but that's okay. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to go forward again. We're just going to come over here. So again, as you see, we've got plenty of room. And we're just going to get what I call another bite at it. We straighten up again. And what we were doing is just chase the van back around, get that as close onto the side as we possibly can. Pretty good to me. Alrighty, so we are back here. We just did a little stopover in the main street of Tanunda to grab some lunch, but we are back now at the caravan park to run you through the rest of this particular setup. So what we're going to be doing today is running through, again, exactly tips and tricks when it comes to setting up. So what you've seen so far is more so getting to the destination. Now we're going to unhook it and run you through the actual setup process inside of the caravan park and a few little things that you must look out for. So obviously first things first is jockey wheel. So we want to be taking the van off the car before we actually level the van up. Now I've invested in one of these little jockey wheel receivers here. So basically this will sit underneath where the wheel goes in, so that will literally sit like so. Now I love this. If you're on a little bit of a slope or uneven ground, it just stops the chance of that wheel potentially rolling. And I do just find it gives you a little bit of lift, additional lift there as well. So I'll always sit this in underneath where that jockey wheel is going to go. Alrighty, make sure that clamp is nice and tight. So I'll just hold that there with one foot. If I don't have the foot there, you'll just see that it'll just go in circles like so. Alrighty. We've got that in position. We're going to come over here to our coupling, handbrake, chains, and obviously all of our cord. So first things first, make sure we pull that coupling back. Go, drop the chains. Up to you whether you want to keep the D-shackles on the vehicle or on the Caravan. I do find that D-shackles tend to go walkabouts, so I prefer to either take them off and put them in the drawer system of the car. In this case, we'll be hooking it on again very soon, so I'm just going to leave them on the back of the vehicle. Anderson plug, 12-pin plug. Now don't just let these dangle on the ground, okay? If you get a bit of wet weather overnight, you don't want these filling up full of mud and water and grime. So just wind them up, whether you wind them around the jockey wheel or just let them sit here nice and high. So they're just up out of the weather, and same deal with your chains. So I want to get that right up. We're now clear of the pin and we're good to drive the vehicle forward. Now before I run away and park the car in our little designated spot here on the site, I'm just going to pull out my trusty level. Now, before we put down our stabilizer legs and stabilize the Caravan, it's really, really important that you get the van as level as possible. The last thing you want to do is be doing your prepping and your cooking inside of the Caravan and the bench tops aren't quite level and they're running uphill or downhill. Things are going to roll around, and there's nothing worse than laying in bed and either having obviously your head up or your head down. So the more level you can get the Caravan, the better. Again, this is just a small little level. I only do this just because of the draw system is quite small, but it does the trick and gets you really close 90% of the time. So what I do is I sit the level here, all right, it's got a little magnet there, and I just watch the bubble. Okay, so I'm just gonna wind this down until the bubble's in the center of the lines, probably somewhere there, maybe up a tad. So I'll always like to stand back and just visually have a look at the van. But as you can see there, it is awfully close. The level says that it's level, it's in position. Again, is only a small level, so there's gonna be some discrepancies, but that looks pretty good. I'm happy there. I'm gonna put the legs down now. Alrighty, so now that is done, what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna move the car. So again, just courtesy inside of the Caravan parks, you just always wanna make sure that you keep the roads and walkways nice and clear. So now we're unhooked and we've got it nice and level. I put the level back in the car, so we're not gonna leave that behind and lose that. I'm just gonna move the car over and get that out of anyone's road. All right, so we have our trusty little winder here. Now again, we've done a couple of videos on the drop down legs, so you will be able to see additional videos on side of our YouTube channel. And we're going to be doing more videos around correctly stabilizing the legs. So I'm just gonna run through this section quickly, but the Manutech leg here, we're gonna take a little bit of weight, pull the handle, and we're gonna drop that down. We then have a second drop here until we touch the ground. We just wanna give that a little bit of a turn, take a little bit of weight there, all right, like so. And we wanna be doing that on all four corners. Alrighty, so legs are down. Just make sure you don't drop this or leave it off to one side of the campsite. You want to always make sure as soon as you're done with it, pop it away. It's so easy, guys, to be able to drive away from a campsite and leave tools like this behind, and then you get to your next destination and you cannot proceed because you haven't got it. Okay, so just make sure once you're done, we pop it straight back where it's designed to go. Alrighty, so van's in, legs down, it's in position. So I'm just going to hook up to power. A very important point just to note, I've just got this nice little cord winder here, which makes life easy. But one thing to note is you do not want to leave the cord in a wound up position like this. You want to make sure that you completely unravel the cord. And before we actually plug it into the van and leave for any period of time, you want to make sure that the coil is actually stretched out as far as you can. A lot of, obviously, heat runs through this cord when it is plugged into 240 volt mains power, and you don't want the cord coiled up like you can see it here on the ground in underneath your Caravan. You want to make sure that you stretch it out so that electricity and that current obviously can disperse throughout the length of the cord and not be all coiled up and create a heat spot right here underneath your new Caravan. So we'll grab this 15 amp lead and we'll make sure that we plug that in there. All right, and we'll just make sure that the safety switch is turned on, which it already is. Now, I am a bit of a neat freak, so I like to stretch this out and make it as tidy as you possibly can in behind the van. But as you can see, I'm gonna try my hardest to not have this all coiled up. Alrighty, now that's nice and neat, laid in there at the back of the van. We're not going to create any hot spots when it comes to 240 volt power. Alrighty, up next we have our mains water. So I've got the water hose here. Now please keep in mind, it's not any old hose. We don't want to be getting a garden hose from Bunnings. It needs to be a food grade hose. Okay, so you can tell the difference. They're either a blue or a white hose. So we can see that a food grade hose, a garden hose typically is more of a green in nature. Your food grade hose typically is a white or a blue. The difference is you don't want that rubberized taste coming through the water inside of your caravan, which comes from here. So again, it's a food grade hose, which is what you want to be using on your caravan. Here we have some fittings. So again, there's two different fitting sizes here. Okay, so you have the smaller size there and then the larger size. Again, they will just thread into one another. All right, so just in like so. Fairly standard stuff. Now, different caravan parks will have different thread sizes when it comes to the hose point or the connection point in the caravan park. So in this case, it is the smaller one. So I'm going to leave these two joined in together. Make yourself a little note, you don't leave these behind. I left 2 or 3 behind when I was on the trip to Noosa, and then you pull up and you're trying to find them and you're having to do a mad dash to Bunnings. So just always make sure whenever you unclick the hose, you always unclick this little fitting as well and bring that with you. That's why I like to keep it in these bags. So I have, again, some additional other fittings in here. I keep the other hose in here as well. And this is just a Coast to Coast brand. So Coast to Coast Caravan and Leisure Drinking Water Hose Carrier. That just rolls in there nicely. Okay, so we have our mains water point here at the front of this particular van. Now, depending on make and model and what exactly caravan you're setting up, this can either be at the front, right up at the A-frame, or it can be down the back on the driver's side. Again, I prefer it at the front here. In the event that your hose was to burst off, you can pick it up very, very quickly because you are here all the time. If you're over the back side, you're going to lose a lot of water before you realize that this snap-on fitting is actually off. So that's the reason that we bring the hose back down the front of the van and click it on at the front. Alrighty, again, make sure you always pop these straight back in the boot or wherever they belong, wherever your spot is. Again, these items you want to make sure are there at every single campsite. So for me, I'll just pop these back in straight away and make sure that they are back in there, and I know that I'm going to grab my fitting off the hose point before I leave. But now I think we are done on the outside. Time to jump inside and set up in there. Alrighty, so step, we'll pull that out, doors open. I'm just going to grab my Muk Mat out. I always use the Muk Mat just at the foot of the door. It saves any little stones potentially getting walked in through the van. So Muk Mat are a fantastic company. They produce a lot of different product, but the one that I have is just a little one that sits here at the foot of the door. So that sits in the boot as well. I'm just going to grab that out. So it rolls up nicely. All right, I just unclip that. It's just Velcroed and that will roll out. There we go. So again, using the Muk Mat to wipe your feet before you're walking inside the van. Just make sure before you put the TV antenna up that you do have a bit of a look outside, because you don't want to be lifting it into a tree branch or anything like that. So I've already checked ours, making sure we have a nice clear way for the antenna to go up. So we pop that up. Alrighty, so I've done plenty of videos on antennas in the past. You will find them inside of this channel as well. But a hot little tip, when you're here at location at the caravan park, you can just stick your head out the window, have a look at your neighbours, see what way their antenna is facing, and just do exactly that. So we've had a look outside. We can see that antennas are facing over in the direction of the main entrance to the caravan park. So we're simply going to pull that down and just rotate the angle around like so. All right, before I even tune the TV in. Our probability of getting it first time will be increased if we do that. Okay, another tip to remember is with your hot water system, if you have an instantaneous hot water, it'll be exactly that. The hot water will be instant. But if you have a tank hot water system, which is the more common and conventional hot water system inside of our industry, it's going to take around about 10 to 12 minutes to heat up, okay? So when you get to destination, whether the hot water system is running on gas or electricity, it's just going to take that little bit longer to heat up. So just be patient when it comes to your hot water. You're not going to be able to jump in the shower straight away unless you have an instant system. So a conventional hot water system, 10 to 12 minutes as a little bit of a rule of thumb there. But again, we have our water on, we have the hot water system on. So we are in the waiting game now for that to heat up. Alrighty guys, so we have just about completed the setup of this particular demonstration for today of the van in here behind us. I'm just going to talk a little bit about caravan park etiquette or campground etiquette. Just make sure if you love a good movie or if you love putting the tunes on over a beer or a glass of red wine, that you are very cautious and conscious of your neighbours next door. They might not have the same desire for your music as what you do. So make sure you get nice and friendly with your neighbour, go over, say hello, introduce yourself. But one of the things that I've always kept top of mind is when your neighbour is setting up or packing up, just let them go about their business. We like to call them Eddie the experts in this industry. It's the guy that always comes over and wants to lend a hand or get involved when you're trying to set up or pack up. Now we know, especially on pack up, there's a lot of things to remember and a lot of things to do. So when you're doing it, you would like to just be left alone to go through your own process. So do the same thing with your neighbor next door. Just let them go through their own process and we don't want to be getting involved, because that's how things get missed. That's how you see people driving down the road with their antenna up, or driving down the road and the door flies open because they've forgotten to do a particular item when it comes down to their pack down and check lists. So yeah, just be very cautious and conscious of that. And again, if you're playing music, just make sure you're looking at the time. You know, when the sun goes down, again, we want to just be really lowering the noise inside of the caravan park, especially with the young families around. You know, so many children, you know, go to bed so early now. So, you know, or children in general just are going to bed a lot earlier than what you are. So if you have a family next door, you know, potentially the mother has just spent half an hour trying to get that baby to go down to bed at 7 o'clock at night. The last thing they want to hear is AC/DC blaring through the outside speakers, waking that baby up. So just make sure some campground, caravan park etiquette is held there. Another one as well, don't walk through someone's campsite. Again, so this area here, it's a bit of a sacred space, okay? So you want to be walking around the outside of where the person's vehicle is. Yes, you may want to go the closest route to the dump point or the closest route to the toilets or the camp kitchen, but just make sure that some common courtesy is had inside of the caravan parks. You don't want you or your children bustling straight underneath someone's rollette awning to get to wherever it is that they're heading. So just be conscious of that as well. And again, never miss happy hour. That is key. The final message here is making sure we can see we got some friends over here by the fire, sitting down, connecting, networking, getting to know one another. There's so many stories that have been told here at caravan parks. It is such a good way to meet people. It's such a good way to connect over a beer, over a glass of red, and share a story or two. So be friendly, get out there, get to know the people that are around you, because you've got things in common. You're all caravanners, you're all campers. So again, you've got a great starting point for a conversation. So there we have it, guys. I tell you what, I wish I was staying out here for a week. The weather today has been absolutely perfect in the Barossa Valley. We really enjoyed ourselves coming out here and sharing our journey with you. We stopped over in the main street for lunch. It might have been a little bit of a long lunch, and hence why the evening is upon us here now. So those are the tips and tricks that we have for you when it comes to getting to caravan parks safely, especially if you are a first-time caravaner and new to this industry. I really hope that these little tips and tricks has helped you and will make your journey easier when you decide to get into the caravan park. Again, there are plenty of people around. If you need to ask for help, ask for help. But just take your time, take a deep breath, relax. It's not a race, all right? We want to just take our time and make sure that we make this experience, the experience of caravanning and camping, as enjoyable for you and your family as possible.